solar energy, wind, and other source of energy. The main objective, as you can see on the left of this slide, is first of all to save energy, to produce clean energy, and to diversify the energy supply. When you then say, well, how this will be implemented in France, and you look at what have done France until now. So let's have a short focus on this 11 terawatt-hour of gas, which are presently injected into the French gas grid. This 11 terawatt-hour have been implemented and built in France since 2011. So from 2011, until now, we have built in France 11 terawatt-hour. The objective in France, which is targeted into the Stratégie Française pour l'énergie et le climat, as so-called SFEC, is 44 terawatt-hour. So in 7 years, we need to triplicate this amount of gas production. So meaning that there is a huge potential for biomethane in France, including renewable gases from a general perspective. Then, if we look at the objective for 2050, the objective is even larger. We speak about 80 to 100 terawatt-hour. If you look at the existing gas consumption in France, we are speaking about approximately 400 terawatt-hour. So, meaning that if we want to decarbonize the gas grid, biomethane and renewable gases will play an important role. Then, in France, you have different levels. We mentioned EU, we mentioned France, and then you have the regional levels. What's the role of regions in France regarding biomethane? Quite easy, let's say. You have, first of all, a role called SRB, Schéma Régional Biomasse. In this SRB, the regions are listing the biomasses available on their territory in order to produce biogas. Then you have the STRADET. The STRADET include everything, including biomethane. The STRADET are really important because the regions, they fix their objective into these documents, saying, well, in this area or in this area, we will go for solar and or wind and or biogas. So it's playing an important role in terms of decarbonization, in terms of energy independency, but also how we can support agriculture by having biogas facilities in our regions. And then recently we have this loi d'accélération pour la production des énergies renouvelables called loi APER, where now the different intercommunalities will have to focus areas for specific renewable energies. The important point here is that the objective fixed by the government is to facilitate the permitting process and accelerate the deployment of renewable energies. And the last, but not the least, is the PCAET. That's really, let's call it micro. So it's a group of municipalities establishing a plan climat, air, énergie, territoire. So this plan has also for objective to determine clearly what the targets that the different municipalities or group of municipalities will have to match the renewable energy production targets. And we wanted to do a small focus on the local and sustainable gas production. Usually biogas say some people are resuming biogas to energy crops, like we seen in Germany a long time ago. There is EU directives called RED II directive. This RED II directive say, well, if you are above 19.5 gigawatt hour of gas production on your plant, you have to be sustainable. What means sustainable? It means that your biomass will have to show a greenhouse gas emission reduction, energy efficiency, and that you are not in competition with either human food or animal food. So that's mainly to capture the essence of what we have in France and pre-introduce what our homologues from Ireland, Spain, and Europe will speak about.
Thank you, Guillaume. Let's have an overview on our region, Pays de la Loire. Currently, I'm just having a short break. Okay, so let's have an overview on our region, Pays de la Loire. On September of last year, 2023, there were 151 AD plants. 88 were CHP and 53 in grid injection. These are more than 500 jobs created, direct jobs, assuming that one AD plant creates 3 to 4 jobs. This is a map of our region. And you can see that our region is divided into 5 sub-regions that we call départements. And there are 80 plants in all of these départements. You will also notice that we have a coast. And we have a few cities. We are a region with semi-urban areas in addition to rather rural areas. On this diagram, what you can see is what was commissioned over the past 10 years. Currently, we have a capacity in injection of a bit less than 1 terawatt per hour. Currently, the tariff, the government tariff supporting the CHP is not much interesting, and as a consequence, all new plants being commissioning are injected into the grid. That here is the target set by the SRADET of the Pays de la Loire, so a regulation that set a target in 2030 of about 3 terawatt per hour. This means that within the next 6 years, we will have to commission 3 times what we installed over the past 10 years. What is a challenge? We believe that our region has many assets to achieve these goals and to develop biogas. The first one is led with agriculture. We are a region with crop and livestock farming, both of them which generate quite a lot of manure. Only a part of this manure is currently valuable, so we still have a potential of manure to be evaluated. In addition, this manure generates greenhouse gas emissions. As you know, AED plants are a way of evaluating, catching these emissions and produce energy with it. Also, because we are an area with a touristic area, especially along the coast and cities, the population tends to pay attention to smell control and is sensitive to the way the manure is spread. So AD plants helps the farmers pursuing their activities. In addition, the regulation increases the storage that has to be equipped to the farmers. They have to store longer and longer the manure. And when you build a tank, it's a bit of a shame to build a tank that produces nothing. Why not building a tank that produces energy with it? In addition, with biogas, you also produce digestate, which is a local fertilizer that replaces fertilizer from oil and gas industry. Our second asset is led to agro-food industry. We have a strong agro-food industry in Pays de la Loire. It represents around 50,000 jobs, and they generate organic waste. This waste needs to be handled, and this waste is also biogas potential. Third, we have a strong dynamic industrial sector, with industry more and more interested in getting free from the fluctuation of energy market prices. So new mechanisms such as BPA could enable this industry to manage their goals. And the fourth asset, we are an association, as I said, within this region with 60 companies. We are companies in all of the fields regarding biogas and renewable gases. As an example, on this trade show today, more than 30 companies on our association are exhibiting today. So we have all the factors to manage a development of biogas, but what we need is a support from the politics and from the population, because biogas is still rather unknown from the population. Although we have 150 plants, most of the people don't know exactly what it is, what are the benefits, and we need their support to develop this energy and prevent that they develop not in my backyard effect. To finish, this is a map of not only the Pays de la Loire, but also Brittany. In Pays de la Loire, we have currently 24 bio-CNG stations in service, and there are 15 projects. And what is interesting with that is that trucks would not drive only in the Pays de la Loire, they will drive in the neighbor regions, such as Brittany. Nowadays, we have 600 stations, CNG stations in France, which enable trucks to drive longer distance and makes it attractive. And it also shows interconnections between regions.
So now it's time to welcome Giulia. So Giulia is a General Secretary of the European Biogas Association. And before that, Giulia joined EBAs in 2022, sorry. Giulia led the Bioenergy's Europe advocacy strategy, coordinating the production of policies report, organization of several working groups. She gained experience in area of sustainability, energy and transports, working in the European trade associations for biofuels, non-ferrous metals and hydropowers in Brussels. Giulia holds a master's degree in international relations of the University of Rome, a master's degree in Europe's affairs from the Free University of Brussels. So please welcome Giulia.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this very lively event. Today my presentation will look at the European landscape indeed, and I will strive to give you elements on 3 different areas. So we will start on the European market, so how it is developing, what is the capacity that we have developed so far, what is the rate of growth. And then we will focus on national energy and climate plans, which are the planning that are happening at member state level, which give us also a view of what are the next steps in energy transitions that the countries are taking, and specifically for new biogas and biomethane targets and capacity. And then I will also try to give you a bit of a landscape on the regulatory environment. So what is happening in Brussels right now? What are the main drivers for the growth of our sector? But also what are the main game stoppers? And I will try to give also some solutions that we can work out together. But before getting down to business, just let me tell you a couple of words about the organization that I represent today. So the European Biogas Association represents around 300 members. Most of them are companies, corporate, that are active along the value chain. So we're talking about business developers, biogas producers, but also multi-utilities companies and corporate users of biogas and biomethane. We also represent a growing number of national associations spanning in 35 countries, so the European Union and a little bit beyond. But let's get started. So where we were in 2022, so the last time we were able to get some data around. Europe produced 21 billion cubic meters of biogases, so biogas and biomethane combined. And this is actually a sizable portion because it corresponds more or less to the gas demand of Poland, which is a big country, and 6% of the EU gas consumption. Now, if you look at the data, the historical data, you realize right away that the biogas sector is being quite static for the past 4 or 5 years, whereas the main growth has been registered in biomethane upgrading and production, with a 20% growth registered in Europe from 2021 to 2022. So these data are encouraging if we're thinking about the 35 billion cubic meters target that is included in the European strategy of the REPowerEU that was mentioned by Guillaume in the start. But let's look closely at the biomethane sector. What happened from 2021 to 2022 is that there was a pretty sizable growth. So at the moment, we are at 4.2 billion cubic meters of installed capacity, of which 3.4 is in the EU27, and the rest is located in the UK and the other European countries, not EU members. The production growth was quite interesting, especially from 2018, where we see a doubling of the production, with the fastest growing country and the leaders being France, Italy, Denmark, the UK in the past few years. However, we see that also the number of countries that are producing biomethane is growing quite fast. So in 2022, in Europe, we had 24 producing countries for biomethane, with 250 new plants starting operation, for a grand total of 1,300 plants active in the EU. Most of the plants are actually injecting in the distribution grid, whereas another part is injecting in the transmission grid or producing liquefied biomethane. I would also like to present you some data on the final uses, and I will tell you a little bit later why. Final uses are actually important, and making sure that there is an active demand from the final consumer is also a very important part of the growth of the market. So this is the first year that we collect this data for biomethane. So needless to say that end uses depend on the country, also on the support and the policies that are put in place. So, for example, Nordic countries and Italy are so far have been focusing on transport, whereas for heating and electricity, Germany is the preferred country. In the pie chart there, you see more or less what is the division in end uses, and you can appreciate right away that there is quite a balance. So 90% is going to transport, 22% is going to buildings, 14% to industry, and this portion is destined to grow, and 15% to power. There is still a 30% that is an unknown, and we're planning to improve our data set for next year with some bilateral exchanges also with the traders to better understand the final utilization of guarantees of origins. Now I will pass to the second part of my presentation, now that I gave you an idea of where the market is going in Europe, and I will present you what is happening in terms of planning for the EU countries. So here you see a timeline for the setup of national energy and climate plans, which are documents that all the EU countries need to submit to the European Commission, including their climate, energy efficiency target, to demonstrate that they are in the right pathway towards decarbonization. The interesting part is that last year and this year are quite key, because the member states are called to update this exercise, and also the Commission asked them to include targets for biogas and biomethane to show what they are doing in order to get to the 35 billion cubic meters target of the famous REPowerEU strategy. Most of the draft plans are now of public domain, have been published. They are still draft. Countries have until May, more or less, to produce their final version. So we analyzed them all, and at the moment, at least until the beginning of January, we had 24 draft updated NECPs out of 27. And the good news is that 12 included biomethane target, 6 included biogas generic targets. Others decided not to go this way, so did not include any specific targets, and 3, as I said, are still missing to date. So in the table there, I will not go through it, but you see all the biomethane targets that have been included so far, and this makes for a grand total of 15.52 BCM, which is a bit short compared to where we want to be in 2030. So we drafted a gap analysis, and we checked out the targets, the current production of biomethane, and we ran it across the potential of these countries. We took the potential from the Gas for Climate study of 2022. And so we made a speedy categorization of the countries to see whether there was no NECPs, no biomethane target, or a target above the potential, similar to the potential, or a little bit lower. And this is the visual result that you might have. So there is a little bit of work to do, but we are also in front of an opportunity because we still have some months before the targets are being finalized. You see here that the methodology that we chose was also to look at the low-hanging fruit. So there are certain countries that decided not to include their biomethane target, that had target in advance that were either decided by the industrial sector or were indicated by the government. So we get to 20.30 BCM. And again, this is good news, a little bit short of the 35 BCM where we want to be. So there is a little bit of more work that we need to do in terms of pushing our administration to adopt more ambitious targets. And now I will also conclude, and this is the last part of my presentation today. So EU policy in 2030 and 2040, we need to look at the midterm target towards decarbonization. As I said before, we have very interesting targets and drivers that are pushing the industry to produce more and do better. The first one I was mentioned is the REPowerEU that fixes an indicative target for the biomethane industry. The second one is a quite ambitious overall EU renewable energy target that is 42.5% of renewables in energy consumption that needs to be produced by 2030. There are also some interesting targets in terms of transport, both for advanced biofuels and for renewable gases in general used in this sector. And also, biogas and biomethane are looked under as clean technology and also critical technology in the Net Zero Industry Act that is trying to help European equipment supplier to maintain the leadership on various clean technology sector. But we find ourselves also in front of notable game stoppers, and most of them, most of these regulatory game stoppers are really on the end utilization. So the first one is the CO2 standards for cars and vans. This is a regulation at European level that bans the utilization of internal combustion engine for the future. And so this foreclosed the utilization of renewable fuels also within the market. The second game stopper that is still under negotiation is the same legislation applicable for heavy-duty vehicles. The negotiation have somewhat proceeded, and an agreement between the co-legislators, so the European Parliament and the Council, have been found last week. This is not yet confirmed, but it doesn't look as we would like it to be at the moment. The fourth game stopper could be, and still this is a file that is being drafted, is the review of the Annex 9, so of the list of the advanced feedstock that can be used for the advanced biofuels target in the Renewable Energy Directive. And there are some doubts also on the eco-design, which sets the rules for example, boilers and residential uses. So it means that there is a lot of work in terms of regulatory to have all the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. There are also some solutions out there. So first of all, we are communicating with the policymakers that biomethane is indeed a CO2 neutral fuel and needs to be considered in the strategy of decarbonization for heavy-duty vehicles and for transport in general. The second point is that we are trying to push to get sustainable feedstocks such as intercrops, sieve in France, to be considered as advanced feedstock in the part A of Annex 9, which is the most relevant one. And then we're also calling for an harmonized transposition of sustainability criteria to really get an internal market for biogas and biomethane. And finally, this will be very important at the beginning of February. The Commission is working on its strategy towards 2040, so how we bridge carbon neutrality by 2050. And we are pushing to get an important role for biogas and biomethane also in the strategies for reaching carbon neutrality by 2040. So this will keep us busy for the next 5 years, probably. Thanks a lot.
So, thank you, Giulia. May we offer you a 5-minute questions if you, with this nice presentation made by Giulia, have some questions which pop up in your heads. We have a microphone here, so please raise your hand if you have any question to address to Giulia. Beaucoup de gens timides. Giulia, perhaps one question, if it can launch the discussions. You are referring to Part A from Annex 9 from RED II directive, which was somehow what I introduced previously in my slides. Can you slightly elaborate what the benefits of these regulations and what can be the tricky part of this regulation in regard of the biomethane production, but also advanced biofuels, as you call it?
Yes. So with RED II, there was the introduction of this annex. The annex is simply a list of feedstock, and it's divided in two parts. Part A basically identifies those feedstock that are to be considered as advanced and therefore can be used for reaching the advanced biofuels and biogases target within the RED. So it makes, of course, more interesting to utilize these feedstocks also for the producer side, and there is a higher market drive for biomethane that is done with these feedstocks. Now, the directive also opened up for biannual updates and reviews of the list. So as I said, it's divided in two parts. The first one is advanced technologies and feedstock, and the second one is mature. So the mature part is actually capped. So it means that if we are using feedstock that are identified and listed in this part of the annex, they can be used to a certain extent. Whereas for the advanced biofuels, there is a very ambitious target, and therefore there's also a market drive to use this kind of feedstocks. The list was minimal, and the Commission, together with a consortium of experts, worked for 2 years to an update. The first version, so the draft version updated was public in December, and we had an issue with it because there was a lack of clarity, and most of the feedstock for biogases were relegated to Part B. Now, there were a lot of discussions, and we haven't seen the final version yet. But one of the most important parts for us would be to consider sequential cropping and intercroppings as an advanced feedstock to make sure that we can also accompany the transition, the agroecological transition, as well the transition towards this kind of cropping for the future of biogases.
Thank you, Giulia. Super clear. We have a question over here.
Thank you for a nice presentation. Have you made any survey of the feedstocks available for producing the target of biomethane in the countries?
So we work on it in the context of the Gas for Climate Consortium and together with some of our members, and we published a study with them in 2022. And the study basically looks at all sustainable feedstock that are not in competition with food and feed or with other added value activities by 2030 and 2050. And the conclusion is that there would be a potential of 41 billion cubic meters that could be mobilized in 2030 and 151 billion cubic meters by 2050. The main feedstock to be mobilized will be animal-related waste, manure. There is a big chunk for sequential cropping, of course, but also industrial wastewater and urban wastewater are a big part of the potential to be mobilized. The study excludes monocrops and energy crops.
Thank you.
It's quite an important point. Today, most of our farmers are in the streets. We push them for decarbonization. And biogas is one of the solutions, an easy solution with mature technology immediately available. So, it's possible. It's not a future. With this mature technology, we can drive a lot of decarbonization of agriculture and support agriculture as it should. Oli?
Yes, thank you, Giulia. And also just to add, if you're interested in bio-CNG, Giulia told about it. Excuse me.
Yes, I had a question about the opportunity or the risks for the market to have countries producing biomethane and other countries consuming this biomethane. Do you have some inputs on this part of the splitting of the market in EU?
At the moment, we haven't drafted an analysis on this. We are analyzing with our technical team the presence of different, for example, guarantees of origins registers in Europe to understand also better the internal market and the flows, how they go. I have to say that for the moment we have concentrated most of our analysis on the production. But we should have by mid-year this year a full mapping of the registries and the internal flows. So hopefully we'll be able to cover that better.
Yes, hello. I have one question regarding maybe it was addressed or not, regarding the transport. So I would like I know that the mass balance mechanism is authorized to mass balance the certificates with the gas grid, and my question is more related to produce bio-LNG, for example. And my question is related to the status of mass balancing the certificates with LNG from terminal gates directly.
So I will give you an answer on the regulatory side. When we look at the implementing regulation 2022-996, which is the one that is covering greenhouse gas values and voluntary scheme certification, there is a specific article 218 that is basically defining the overall EU gas grid as well as the LNG terminal as one mass balance unit. So this is formally the principle that you're referring to. At the end of last year, we had some lively discussions about this. It appears that certain member states are going to open the possibility to do this kind of exercise. Others are a bit not there with this kind of transposition. The question there is also the greenhouse gas default value for this exercise. So how do we account for the liquefaction that is happening somewhere in the world? So I'm sorry if it's not a completely direct answer, but I guess that I touched upon the elements that you thought.
Hey, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Giulia. And if you're more interested in bio-CNG, tomorrow at 11:30, there is a conference about this topic. Now I would like to introduce Seán from the Irish Bioeconomy Association. Seán has been working, he joined the IrBEA in October 28. He is a chartered engineer. He has a Bachelor of Civil Engineer from the National University of Ireland. And he is leading the IrBEA and its members for a sustainable future in bioenergy and to position the biomass, the biogas, biochars, biofuels, wood fuels, and energy crops to play a key role in Ireland's sustainable renewable energy roadmap. Prior to joining IrBEA, Seán worked for 12 years in the construction industry with Ireland's largest building contractor, and he served as the 35th National President of the Irish Young Farmer Association. Welcome, Seán.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. I work for the Irish Bioenergy Association, so I've only got 4 slides this morning, so I'm going to break it up into about the association, what the targets are for Ireland in terms of biogas, biomethane, what is the current state of affairs, and then what are the requirements in terms of fulfilling our obligations. So to briefly start, the Irish Bioenergy Association, we were established in 1999. We are the representative body for the bioenergy sector on the island of Ireland, and we do cover all of the bioenergy areas. Our main work as a representative body is in lobbying, policy development, advocacy, and indeed providing knowledge and information to our members and broader stakeholders. And we have a wide, diverse range of members. Specifically involved in the biogas, biomethane area, our members include farmers who are interested in the area, farm representative bodies, so people that are representing farmers, feedstock suppliers, so they could be suppliers of waste-based feedstocks or indeed crop-based feedstocks, technology providers, some of who are exhibiting here today, as well as AD project developers. We also have within our membership a number of end users of biogas and biomethane, and also a lot of users of digestate, people that want to utilize digestate for more of a circular approach in their agricultural systems. More information is available on our website, and we also have a pavilion here today. So some of our members are accompanying us on that pavilion, including Salignus, who is an analytical company, Arigna Fuels, who are a biochar producer, and also we're hosting 2 of our partners in terms of some of our partners in terms of our European projects we're involved in. So we're at D15 if anyone is interested in talking further to us on our pavilion. So moving on to the next slide, Ireland, like many European countries, has set a target for biomethane production by 2030. The Irish target is 5.7 terawatt hours. In the context of where we sit now, this target is very ambitious, and my next slide will show you where we are at now. To put this in context, the 5.7 terawatt hour target is or will be in the range of 180 to 200 large-scale AD plants. So these will be sizable plants. That's the current ambition in Ireland. And we await the government biomethane strategy. It's hoped from an industry perspective that the biomethane strategy will clearly set out what the supports, incentives and measures are going to be to mobilise the sector over the next number of years. Disappointingly, we were expecting that strategy to be published in September 2023. In September 2023, we were told it was December, and it still hasn't been published, even though we're into the new year now. So we await with anticipation the publication of the strategy. And we have fed into that strategy in terms of providing feedback to the government department that's involved in its development, and also the consultants involved. Really, market certainty is required by our members and indeed the broader sector in Ireland. This market certainty is required in the form of they need to know, the industry needs to know what the supports are going to be available over the coming decade in order for them to be able to proceed to the next stages with their projects. The next stages being their planning and consenting processes, but also to ensure that they can source finance and funding and the necessary approvals that they need to move the industry and their projects forward. There's a lot of discussion about market-based supports in Ireland. There is a talk about a renewable heat obligation scheme. A renewable heat obligation scheme, and we already have a renewable transport obligation scheme, and biomethane is currently being used as part of that scheme in terms of fulfilling some of the requirements on fossil fuel suppliers. But for the renewable heat obligation scheme, it's envisaged that the market would be obligated to contain a certain percentage of renewable fuels in their fossil fuel mix. So we strongly are saying that for a renewable heat obligation scheme to be successful, the threshold for obligation needs to be kept at quite a low level so that you obligate most of the market, and at the same time the ambition within it needs to be significant so that it can support volume of biomethane. So again, this is a legislative piece that's in development, and we are hoping that the details will be published shortly. Really what our members require is ongoing operational aid or support. There's a lot of skepticism about the capital grant model from a biomethane perspective, because the volumes of capital that are required are significant considering the overall level of investment. So a capital support on its own, in the opinion of our members, will not be sufficient to drive the market forward, because there's a worry that you won't be able to find the other percentage of the capital that you need to build the facility, and that the projects will be bankable, and that the investment will be able to repay itself if you're solely dependent on a gas market that fluctuates. So some form of mechanism is required in the form of ongoing support, or indeed contract for difference. Focus in Ireland is on agri-centric plants using agricultural feedstocks, and that's, as an agricultural country, that's an important aspect. So moving on to the next slide, in Ireland we have currently 43 biogas plants producing 580 gigawatt hours. Most of these plants are using CHP to produce electricity, combined heat and power units, and they are supported through the Renewable Electricity Feed-in Tariff 3 scheme. There are 2 biomethane plants producing 41 gigawatt hours of biomethane in 2022. So we need a considerable jump in terms of production of biomethane to get anywhere close to the targets which are being set. To break down the 45 anaerobic digestion plants in total, there are 13 of those involved in the production of biogas or biomethane from sewage sludge. There are 16 of those processing landfill gas. And really, it's only the 12 that are classified as industrial plants that are mainstream biogas plants, in that they take in feedstocks and they produce biogas, biomethane from those feedstocks. And then there are 4 other plants who are involved with a combination of the other different feedstocks. So I'd like to acknowledge the source of this data being the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and indeed the IrBEA statistical report, which is a very good publication. So that's just the current state of affairs. So it shows you the gap between where we are currently and what is actually required to achieve the target or the objective set out by government by 2030. So to conclude, this is my final slide. I'm just going to focus on some of the key requirements from industry to make this, the objectives that's been set, realisable. So the first is market certainty through medium to long-term supports, and this is required to mobilise the sector. And this has mobilised the sector across many European countries where there are more advanced markets than there are in Ireland. The supports that are put in place need to be sufficient to give developers and project operators enough funds that they can operate, maintain, and pay for feedstocks over a longer term, over the long term. And obviously, depending on the type of feedstocks that are being used, that changes the economic proposition of the facilities quite significantly. The third is around clarity on the licensing and permitting process, where we have a local authority system where each plant in their vicinity can apply for their planning permission. It's the follow-on steps where appeals take place, where there are no statutory timelines and deadlines, appeals to the planning board and other offices. So we would really be insisting that some form of statutory timelines are put in place so that developers know where they stand and where they are along the road in terms of those permitting steps. Political leadership is very important, and we need that, and I think that's lacking in some cases because you have a lot of objections from politicians to biomethane plants, while at the same time their party and government is setting targets for ambition in terms of delivery. Digestate in terms of its treatment and replacement of chemical fertilizer is important so that you can help to address agricultural emissions, but it's a challenge considering that they're classified as chemical being inorganic and digestate being organic, in that it's a complex area, but I'm happy to discuss this further with anyone individually if you would like. Planning, consenting, I've kind of touched on that already, clear guidelines, and then really deliver the government target on a phased basis. That's very, very important because you have to walk before you can run. So delivering the target on a phased basis is important and allows for amendment and update of maybe the supports and indeed other aspects as the industry rolls out and mobilises. So I'm conscious of the time, so I'll leave it at that, and thanks again for the opportunity to present here today. And I'm happy to take any questions and indeed discuss afterwards with anyone that has interest in the Irish market. Thank you.
Do you have any question to Seán?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned an ambitious target with 200 plants, and you said large-scale plants. So I have two questions. The first one is what means large scale? And the second one is does the liquefaction of biomethane can help to achieve this ambitious target in Ireland?
Okay, so by large scale, the general view is that there will be something of an average of about 40 gigawatt hour plants, so they're quite sizable production facilities. So that's what is being looked at. That's not to say that all plants will be that size. There may be some that might be smaller, but the average, they're looking at something in that range. But ultimately, we would be saying, as an organisation, and our members would be saying, that it should be up to the developer of the facility to specify the size, really, that the state should not be prescriptive in terms of that size. But generally, it's larger size plants that's been talked about in that kind of a range, 40 gigawatt hour. In terms of liquefaction, it certainly presents potential opportunities. However, it remains to be seen. We're starting from such a low base that the immediate priority will more than likely be to produce biomethane and inject it into the gas grid, or indeed use it off-grid from with users that might necessarily be on the gas grid. But certainly liquefaction could potentially have a part to play in the future, but I think the first step would be to get some basic biomethane biogas production facilities in place, and then there could be could follow on from that by looking at options to maybe add value to that output from those plants. So I think initially our focus will be on biomethane, and then potentially liquefaction could be a possibility after that.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I do have a question to Seán. Great.
Can you hear me? Yes. I've got a question about acceptability. You know, in France, we have an issue of acceptability. Is it the case in Ireland?
Yes, it has been the case for some of the projects which have currently embarked upon the planning permission process. Fundamentally, it depends on what level of consultation has taken place with the local community and indeed with the local regulator and the political personnel within the particular catchment area of the plant. So we have seen significant issues in terms of acceptability in some cases, not in all cases. It also depends on if it's a greenfield site or a brownfield site compared to building a facility at an existing production facility, if it's an industrial site that already has a processing facility of some other kind. So really the acceptance, it depends on the individual situation and circumstance. But we have issues. It would be fair to say that there are issues in Ireland around it, and there's a lot of lack of information and knowledge about what the technology is, what it does, and a lot of misinformation put out there by people who might be anti-AD or biogas, biomethane production, or indeed just don't have any knowledge of it but think they know what it's about. So it would be a challenge for us.
So let's ask my question. I imagine, Seán, that grass is a high potential for biogas in Ireland. Is it the case? And how can you imagine or organizing, valuing this potential?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Ireland is a grass-producing country. Over 80% of our land is in grassland. So we have a large population of ruminants, cattle, sheep and animals. So production of grass is certainly a big opportunity for anaerobic digestion. I suppose the challenge with grass is that first of all you have to ensure that you fulfill the Renewable Energy Directive sustainability criteria. So the percentage inclusion of grass is limited based on the requirement to demonstrate that you can show a reduction in terms of greenhouse gas emissions by using grass. So it'll be co-digested with a large percentage of the co-digested material being the slurry or animal waste. The other challenge for use of grass in Ireland would be that you have to pay farmers to produce it. And the cost of production of a tonne of grass is anything in the range of 55 to 70 euros a tonne. So that's a significant cost on a biomethane facility, which has to be factored into the economic modelling in terms of making the operational viable. So simply, there is an opportunity for grass. The percentage inclusion will be very specific based on the Renewable Energy Directive criteria on greenhouse gas emissions, and the costing is a consideration that needs to be taken into account. But and as an animal producing country, we have lots of grass and lots of potential to increase our grass production. Current optimum soil levels are at a very poor state fertility wise, so there's an opportunity to increase that fertility by not doing a whole lot but just basic soil management, and you can increase the production of grass that way, so you wouldn't be competing with the animal production from that grass.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Has anyone more question? Ben, in this case.
Yes, so now we have to welcome Luis Puchades from Spain. Luis is the Vice President of the Spanish Biogas Association. And Luis has an agricultural engineering background in the School of Agricultural Engineering and Environment of Valencia, and an MBA at the University of Politiques of Valencia. Luis has been involved in the biogas industry from more than 20 years now. He's the CEO of BioVic engineering company, who has now been involved into more than 50 biogas projects. In the last 10 years, he has also been director of the Spanish subsidiary of Israeli company Ludan Group, And before that, he had a role in being director of a Spanish subsidiary of Biogas Nord AG. Thank you to welcome Luis.
Thank you very much. And first of all, before I start, I would like to thank Methatlantique for giving us the opportunity to come here as the Spanish Biogas Association and to talk about what is the situation of the biogas and the biomethane in our country. To pass? That's it. Okay. The Spanish Biogas Association was founded in 2009. It began as an association mainly of biogas plant builders, and later it has developed in an association where we also have energy utilities, plant operators, engineering and consultancy companies, and even gas companies. Our goal is to promote the development of projects, of anaerobic digestion projects in Spain, and also to try to eliminate the barriers that this business has had in this country. And unfortunately, so far, we have not been able that successful. Biomethane and biogas initially has been a very difficult business in Spain, despite being one of the countries with more potential in Europe. In some of the studies made, definitely Spain always ranges between the second and the third place in terms of raw potential of biogas, because we have a very strong livestock industry, food industry. It's a relatively large country. But despite so, well, it's not been easy. To finalize with the Spanish Biogas Association, right now we are more than 100 members, and definitely our association is growing steadily, especially over the last 3-4 years. Now, biomethane, the biomethane industry is growing in Spain. Definitely, there is a lot of interest, especially from the private sector, not so much from the public sector. Spain, as I said, it's been a very complicated market to build and develop biogas plants. Up to 2012, we had a feed-in tariff system, which was modest, but at least it was something. But in 2012, the government cut it retroactively. What does that mean? That first of all, the sensation into the private sector was definitely very poor, in a way that, well, there was a feed-in tariff and the government has changed it retroactively, so we cannot trust the government. And since 2012, there has been no support to biogas plants. Despite so, some biogas plants have been built in Spain, but basically associated either to the wastewater treatment sector or to the municipal waste sector, or some of the more typical agricultural projects have also been associated to feed gates and treating especially sludge from the food industries and some of the products that definitely you get a fee for its treatment. It was the only way to make projects in Spain, and so far it is the only way right now. Now many biogas and biomethane projects are being developed in Spain. We will talk about later. And something has changed. But these changes do not come from any policy from the government. It has changed because the large energy companies are having a lot of interest in the Spanish potential biomethane for two reasons. There is a lot of raw potential, and it is not subsidized. Therefore, we have all the large utilities in Europe purchasing right now biomethane in Spain, or purchasing certificates of biomethane that can be later transported. That enables us to make projects because the contracts are relatively fine, at least for the first wave of projects. And on the second half, between ourselves, looking at our history, if I have to trust in a contract with a company like Total or Engie or the Spanish government, definitely and unfortunately I stay on the private sector. What do we have now in Spain? Spain, we have around 250 biogas plants, most of them associated to the, as I said, wastewater treatment plants, municipal waste treatment plants. And there is around 60 projects, what we would consider the typical agricultural projects. And of those projects, in most of them, they are treating wastes from the food industry, where you have a gate fee, and with that, you can compensate the lack of feed-in tariff. For example, me on a private level, I'm shareholder in some biogas projects in Spain, and I tell you that right now the gate fees are 2 times more the income than the energy. But this is going to change very quickly because of this great wave of very large biomethane projects that are coming. Right now there is around 9 biomethane projects injecting into the grid, and one of them is producing Bioenergy. And it's expected right now, there is around 10 more projects under execution right now. Take in mind that most of these projects are relatively large. We are talking about 50 gigawatt size projects to 100, 150. That's the average size of the biogas projects. And there is more than 200 projects right now under permitting. And as I said, all this is organized on private contracts from energy companies that have interest on purchasing certificates from Spain. Spain has a target of 20 terawatts of biogas production for 2030, but still we are very far, definitely, from that figure. Some studies have been made in Spain from different associations and also from public administrations. We can say that probably the potential of biogas production in Spain is above 100 terawatts right now. The potential, of course, what can be made, it depends on the economical conditions and also on the environmental restrictions that are put on the waste producers. What type of wastes are we going to find in most of the Spanish projects? Basically, it's wastes from livestock. Take in mind that Spain, I think right now, is the largest pig meat producer in Spain, in Europe, is the number 3 in cattle meat, and the number 2 in poultry. There's a lot of farms in Spain, and the production only of pig manure is around 50 million of cubic meters per year. So it's a huge amount. So most of the projects are going to be focused on this type of products, which is very good from the point of view of being an advanced biofuel and from the carbon footprint of the biomethane. Also, we have some projects based on straw. Despite, because of the drought conditions of the last 2 years in Spain, the straw right now is very expensive. And also of the food industry. And other byproducts coming from the different industries of Spain. One of them, which is going to be absolutely relevant for the future, is the olive industry, the olive meal waste. Spain is the largest producer of olive oil in the world. And there are millions of tons of alperujos, which is the olive meal waste, which also the productivity of biogas of such product is very good if it's co-fermented. So we have definitely a very nice potential there. Spain never had any type of feed-in tariff nor support for energy crops. There are some regions definitely with a lot of potential for doing energy crops, because what we miss in water, we have it in sun hours, and there have been some pilot approaches using some tropical energy grasses and things like that, but so far I would say that the energy crop is going to be a very minor part of the biogas in the future in Spain. Also because if it relies fully on private contracts, the purchasers of biomethane definitely want the best carbon footprint and to be included in the Annex 9 of the RED II. And as we all know, pure energy crops do not fit, and sequential crops, I hope they fit in the future, but still it's not a certainty. So, as I said, now Spain is a very strange country, definitely, and for biogas especially, because we have very few projects, running. We have no feed-in tariff, no incentive at all, but there are hundreds of projects under development in something that could be called as a bubble. There is now a bubble of development in Spain. If Spain had had a more organized way, a policy for the biomethane, definitely this wouldn't be happening, but it is not the case. So what are the main restrictions that we are finding in Spain? First of all, that there is not a feed-in tariff or a feed-in premium. So everything relies on a market, which is not something bad by itself, but definitely is risky in a way that if in a certain moment the traders from the Netherlands, from France, from Switzerland, from Germany that are purchasing biomethane in Spain stop purchasing because the legislations have changed in their countries, or it's coming cheaper biogas from the east of Europe, for example, then the whole industry goes down. So it's needed a certain support. What does this mean also? That the projects under development are really large. Medium-sized projects are in the range of 800 to 1,000 cubic meters normal per hour biogas, but some others are double or triple that amount. Why? Because definitely if it's a private contract and you get, let's say, 100 euros per cubic meter of biomethane, the larger the plant, the better. But then we are missing a very important part of the biogas, which is the smaller facilities closer to the waste generation that are going to have less public problematics. And definitely it's needed some way to enhance these small and medium-sized projects in Spain, which is right now not there. Also, we have a very complicated permitting process. On a personal level, I tell you, we are now building a project that we started the permitting 5 years ago. And usually it's between 2, 3, 4 years of permitting. That's too much, and it's too difficult. Spain should improve on that way. Also, there are no incentives for the connectivity to the gas infrastructure. And like I think in France that's different. And that makes complicated for most projects that are away from the biomethane grid to be realities. There are also some initiatives of BioLNG, which I think are very promising, but also some work should be done on that way. I guess the issue of the digestate is something also, it's a problem for all of Europe in a way that it's not clear the application when a digestate is considered the end of waste condition, when it's possible to spread it, when it is not. In Spain, that brings a lot of uncertainties in a way that you have the animal byproduct legislation, the fertilizer legislation, the environmental legislation, and also you have every of the 17 different Spanish regions, communities, has a different view on how should this be handled. That definitely doesn't help. And also, to finalize what could be nice for the Spanish market is that the European Common Policy for Agriculture enhances the use of the organic fertilizers produced by digestate. We all talk about that. Personally, you know, I'm an agricultural engineer. I'm a firm believer on the great future of the organic fertilizer industry associated to biogas. In Spain, it's especially important in the way that we have a serious water problem. It's a very dry country and it's getting drier and drier. Definitely we need to establish a strong culture of the organic fertilization in order to increase the amount of organic matter in our soils, which is in 80% of Spain lower than 1%, in order to improve the retention of water in the soil. But there are no incentives, and the agriculture common policy doesn't give any it means no difference for a farmer if it's using organic fertilizer coming from renewable sources or chemical fertilizers. That needs to be changed. And also it could be good in Spain to have a certain obligations of biomethane in the grid, which we do not have. And That's the situation from Spain, and I will be pleased to reply to any question that you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. So you explained very well that the biogas business in Spain relies on the gate fee from the waste producers, and now for the biogas purchase agreement. So assuming that the purchasers are everywhere in Europe, so you said that also you will have some large-scale plant producing biomethane. So is it the way to proceed? Is it that you will feed into the grid all the molecules produced in Spain, or do you plan also to liquefy it and to send it directly in liquid state to the purchasers?
From the projects that we know on a first hand, some of them are directly injecting into the grid, either to the distribution or to the transport grid, and then the certificates are sold. And there are some other projects, those that are far away from the grid, that are going through the Bioenergy PPAs, which are relatively different to the gas grid injection PPAs, in the way that, for example, to produce Bioenergy, the carbon footprint is even more important than for the grid injection. And perhaps sometimes to inject into the grid, you can have, let's say, 100 or 90 euros per megawatt energy molecule plus certificate, but you need to fulfill, let's say, maximum 12 grams of CO2 per megajoule. But with Bioenergy, your prices depends a lot on the carbon footprint. Therefore, it can be much, much, much higher if you are in a minus 10, minus 20, minus 30 grams of CO2 per megajoule. That means that you need to bring a lot of money into the project and probably to liquefy the CO2, but it's fine. Definitely, I think there is room for the Bioenergy in Spain.
Thank you.
Any more questions to Luis? Otherwise, we can have more questions to Seán, also to Giulia, and each of them can also answer to some specific questions, if any.
Good morning. Thank you for your interesting presentation. Even if we all understood that there are a few projects injecting at the moment, even if there are hundreds of them in development, could you tell us what is the average production cost of a megawatt hour in Spain?
The average production cost of the biogas projects?
Yes.
I would say something between 70 and 90 euros per megawatt, including the capex, the opex, and in most cases the digested handling, that it's the key aspect. So let's say that right now the substrates are not that expensive, but we are foreseeing a situation that if only 20% of the projects that are under development are built, there will be much more stress on the feedstock. So definitely, if you consider no cost in the feedstock or in the digestates, there you are in the range of 50. But we need to be realistic and see where more or less we will be staying. But that gives an opportunity in the way that most of the contracts right now of PPAs in Spain are in the range of 100 euros per megawatt. A little bit less, a little bit more, but so now there is a differential gap there. There's an opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for a good presentation. The handling of digestate, you mentioned it. What would you recommend to do if you were to build a plant or get the permission to build the plant in Spain at the moment?
Usually for the handling of the digestate, the first thing I will do is to look at what is the local agriculture. Because in Spain you have a lot of different climates and agricultures. The north is very humid and rainy. The center is relatively dry. In the south, for example, you have a lot of drip irrigation facilities. So right now in Spain we are watching projects. Some of them are directly spreading into the land, especially areas where you have a lot of cereals. You have a lot of projects where you are attaching the biogas plant to a composting facility, which is a very good combination in the way that the sun makes part of the job for you in drying the digestate, especially in regions where the rain is very, very limited. And even in some other projects, we are and they are developing projects or in construction projects that have associated, for example, membranes or other technologies to concentrate the digestate to produce some water. And with the concentrates, they are microfiltered to be later used into drip irrigation. And that's also very promising in the way that the Spanish agriculture pays a lot of money for liquid organic matter that right now is coming especially from the sugar beet factories. But now digestates will start to enter. Always, general recommendation, give space and put a composting plant side to your biogas plant, because from the point of view of the waste management, it gives you a lot of flexibility, because some products are not suitable for the biogas plant, but are very good for a composting, a structuring agent. And also for handling the digestate is good, and to produce a dry organic fertilizer that will be easier to transport, it's good. So that's the general recommendation. And then particular sites, you need to look at how the agriculture is, and then you see, okay, here it's needed either a product for drip irrigation, or here is needed a product for the corn or the tomato production, or look, we have a problem. This is a very area very mountainous. There is no land to apply the digestate, so either we treat by equivalent to a wastewater treatment plant, NDN or something like that, or let's try to concentrate it if we have the energy and transport it to other place. But it depends a lot.
Thank you.
May I ask a question to you, Giulia, on targets? You know, we can clearly see now that countries have really high targets. But how these targets will be matched? You know, how can we reach these targets? We can see that in France there is a lot of opportunities. I think the regulation is on digestate, for instance, is much more clear than what it is in Spain. So there are lots of different situations in all over Europe. How can we get something out of EU to help and support the development in the different countries? I don't know if you have any ideas.
It is a bit of a crystal ball question, but I'll try to give you a coherent answer. So the reason why I also focus my presentation today on the National Energy and Climate Plan is because I think that this exercise that is monitored by the European Commission is possibly in the short term the best chance that we have in order to submit credible targets that the countries must work towards. I'm saying must because the idea is that the national energy and climate plans altogether constitute a sort of a governance of the energy union, so giving really the pathways for energy transition. In the plans, countries also needed to detail what are their support schemes and what are the market conditions that they have to put in place to reach their own greenhouse gas emissions, renewables, and energy efficiency target. Now, having a strong guidance from the European Commission in this case will be vital because they will have to calculate. They have already calculated, actually, the first drafts to see where we are lagging behind and what are the countries that needs to do more. So this will be a very important exercise for the plan. Then what we heard from the national association's perspective, it's true that we can always do better. And we need to keep in mind that when talking about biogas and biomethane, legislative conditions are quite intricate because we are a sector that cuts across different fields. Agriculture, waste, to name two, energy, transport, industrial uses, as well as byproducts such as digestate, biogenic CO2. So ideally, making sure that each of the byproduct has a solid market and a solid drive can contribute towards having a growth as steep as we are looking for.
Thank you, Giulia. Seán, do you want to add something? I was looking at you, checking your head.
Yeah, just my point was more in connection with the question from down here about the costings, because the costings are very different in terms of production based on the feedstocks that you put in. So in Ireland, we're looking at, as was mentioned, about grass and agri-centric based feedstocks. And that's a totally different proposition besides a biomethane plant receiving a waste material where they might be even paid to take that material. So when we talk about costings, I suppose we're envious of the costing in Spain in that range, where we would be talking about anything from maybe 110, 120 euros a megawatt hour to maybe up to 150, 60, depending on the feedstock. So that was just one point. I think in terms of your question about achieving targets, ultimately, it's easy maybe for governments to put in place targets, but to actually put a roadmap in place as to how they're going to be delivered is the big challenge. And I don't think the scale of the challenge has been realized, particularly in Ireland anyways, in terms of what will be necessary in order for that to take place. So that's our job as an industry representative grouping, to very clearly advocate on behalf of our members as to what those challenges are. But really, if those challenges aren't addressed in 2024, it's going to be very difficult to achieve by 2030. So time is of the essence here.
Thank you, Seán. Any more questions from the room? We are almost there. Finished? Finished. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for the keynote speakers, Seán, Julian, Luis. Many thanks. A lot of preparation behind this presentation. So thank you again for your time.